Culturedog Sam Hatch back with another video. What's going on YouTube? And a couple nights ago I saw Mad Max Fury Roads. I figured I'd stop by my den of iniquity here and just chat about it for a couple minutes because this film, I hate to say it, was the film I was looking forward to the most this summer. There's other upcoming projects I'm really excited about, like Spectre, etc. But I'd seen a bunch of trailers, and I tend to stay away from excessive trailer watching, like Avengers Age of Ultron. I watched the first trailer, and then I didn't watch any of the other ones, really, unless I'm in the theater and they're actually screening it. But I won't go out of my way to look up, trailer number 2 and 3 and 4, etc., because, I don't want to know too much about it. And there's a few films where they just have an inherent kind of message that's not even conveyed in a narrative sense. There's just a sense of what the film is going to be like, and sometimes I just kind of intuitively tap into that. Fight Club, I just dropped my video on my Fight Club collection. I mentioned that same thing. I just got the vibe of the movie from the trailer and knew what I was going to get without knowing anything about the story. And the same thing with Mad Max Fury Road. I just knew the vibe of the film, and I got what it was going to be about, innately. I didn't get what the story was about at all. It just, these crazy visuals. If you saw the first couple trailers, it was just like watching a animatic from Rock Band 2, with guys playing guitars that had flamethrowers on them, on vehicles, etc. And that was one of the things I got into with my dad early on, where he was, talking about, you're gonna, your one gas is precious in this post-apocalyptic wasteland of the Mad Max universe. So you're going to waste, all this energy, making a giant, caravan vehicle that has, amplifiers on it and a guy with a guitar and taiko drums. And I was like, no, that's awesome. So we kind of reached an impasse there. But I thought that was kind of the point, was that this world is insane. These characters are not thinking clearly. And the ego that drives the kind of larger than life villains of this series makes their priorities completely out of whack. So these villains, have a need for, as much as victory or revenge, they have a need for, psychological warfare, or in this case, somebody to create background music for them while they're going on their kick-ass adventures. So I was digging that stuff. It was over the top and crazy, and the amount of other over the top visuals in the trailer just sucked me in immediately. And I was a fan of the original series. The first one I saw in the theater was Mad Max 2: The Road Warrior. The first film over here in the States wasn't, it was definitely a hit and a cult item to watch. Everybody loved the kind of craziness and over the top elements of it, but the dubbing kind of put off a lot of people because there was some really cheesy, voice acting going on in that. But Mad Max 2: The Road Warrior was kind of this big, breakout hit in the early 80s, and that was, that was part of growing up for me. When that hit cable, we had a copy of it and just watched it all the time. Friends of the family would come over and watch it, so it's like when people used to sit down and watch Wizard of Oz, on a holiday or something like that. That was my Wizard of Oz. We'd gather around and watch Max and all the crazy people out to get gas and everything like that. So being weaned on that film, and then eventually becoming disappointed by Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome, which is interesting because looking back on it, that film was actually pretty well reviewed, but everyone I know who saw it was disappointed in it. And also interesting, it was kind of accused of being too Hollywoodized and too nice for such an anti-hero character to kind of, shepherd a bunch of kids. And the second half of the movie really does kind of turn into Hook, obviously before Hook, but it definitely gets into that Peter Pan Lost Boys thing, and it definitely loses some zazz. But the thing I think it was most disappointing was the lack of vehicle action. Road Warrior is notorious for having the last, essentially third of the film just one big road chase. And in the third film, it's, there's a lot of gyrocopter action, but there's also like a train, so there's a train set piece, and it just didn't really fly as well. And yeah, there was some really cool stuff within Thunderdome itself, but yeah, the movie itself just, I don't know, it just didn't really work on every level for me. But it, you know, George Miller is a producer. You know, his production group, you know, would put these films together, and you can't really say that he was, you know, strong armed into making this more of a Hollywood friendly film. I think it was probably just where he was at that moment. So as a fan of the series, I was always interested in another film, but, you know, always kind of worried that it wasn't going to be, you know, what I was expecting, or it was just going to be, you know, more like Thunderdome. And Fury Road was this project. It was just gestating for ages. I mean, it was in developmental hell. I remember reading, oh, they're making it, they're doing it, they're writing the script, you know, ages ago, like well over a decade ago. And, you know, Mel Gibson's going to be in it, and all things, you know, greenlit, ready to go, and then it would fall apart. I think Fox was involved in it for a while. And but, you know, the one cool thing, well, there's so many cool things about the Mad Max series in general, but what's cool about it is, you know, George Miller's vision is really, you know, just unfettered and strong, and, you know, producing films himself, I'm sure, helps with that. But I mean, if you watch Fury Road, it's an Aussie film. It's not a Hollywood film. It is what it is, and it's just chock full of his, you know, insane, visionary kind of genius. And yeah, Fury Road had me at the word go, and I loved it. I mean, Tom Hardy, really good stepping in as Max Rockatansky, and I love the credits, how it, you know, has like, yeah, Tom Hardy as Max Rockatansky, and Charlize Theron as Imperator Furiosa. It was almost like a video game thing, and there's so many video games have borrowed from the Mad Max, you know, lexicon, and so many other films have as well. It's hard not to think of, you know, other wannabes that didn't kind of crashed and burned, like Waterworld, etc. But and even some of the, you know, the Mad Max films before would, you know, they were big enough budget, but they would have kind of moments where they would drag a little bit and stuff. Not so this one. And that was the vibe I was getting from it. I'd heard that it was pretty much just one big chase scene. And that's why I was like, I think George Miller's just going for it. And he's just shooting out of the gate and kind of aiming the character more at just this badass anti-hero, and just riding the intensity of it. And sure enough, it sets up this quick scenario where, you know, Max is captured and taken into this place called the Citadel, and encounters Immortan Joe, or not Immortal Joe, but this larger than life character, much in the you know, tradition of Mad Max villains like Humongous, and of course Toe Cutter, who it's played by the same gentleman who played Toe Cutter. So it was very cool. I was surprised Bruce Spence didn't show up in here, because, you know, he's been in, you know, 2 of the films at least. So that was pretty cool, and it sets up this scenario where Max is just fighting for his life, and it quickly, you know, gives you enough character, you know, kind of flashback moments to let you know that Max is traumatized by decisions he's made in the name of surviving, basically. So it's a western, a post-apocalyptic western with a, you know, he was always like a kind of Clint Eastwood-esque man with no name character, and that carries through. And much like films, you know, any film where there's a guy that, you know, his survival means not caring, like, you know, The Professional Leon, something like that. Max has learned time and again that once you get involved with somebody, or you know, want to, you know, side with somebody in this world, that likely means your doom. So starts off with this really intense character, and he's captured by these people that look like these, you know, white ghoulish kind of creatures, and they're just these warlords, these war babies. They're these, you know, fighters of Immortan Joe, and they actually capture people and use them to suck their blood out, or, you know, they have it hooked up via IV, and they get transfusions from, you know, blood bags, as they call it. And Nicholas Holt is fantastic as Nux, one of these up and coming kids, and immediately you're just struck by almost anime like. If you ever like look at any kind of behind the scenes literature for anime releases, the amount of detail that, you know, the kind of production designers would go into for those productions, it's just amazing. You know, I used to look at the Macross stuff, and every little element was thought out, and that's what I was struck by really quickly by this, is, you know, how much of this world and how many strange little details are injected into it, because it's you know, so many bits that could have come off mundane or just like every other Cinemax post-apocalyptic thriller that you've seen over the years. But there's always that little twist and everything. And quickly, you know, even when you're introduced to Immortan Joe, like all these details about his face mask, and when he breathes, or this like bellows like apparatus behind him. And there's always just a cool little twist of like imagery or concept that George Miller throws in there that really keeps it fresh, like throughout the entire film. And just when you think he's got to be exhausted of like either surreal imagery or just something interesting to give you a kick, he pulls something else out of his hat, and it's really amazing. So Max is captured by these people and is turned into a blood bag for Nux, and almost immediately this mission is talked about, in which Charlize Theron's character is taking a war rig out on a mission to gather more gas, because gas again is this luxury and is a necessity, and also explains the Citadel has apparently massive stores of water that they occasionally dump on the citizens that, you know, dwell below this kind of you know, high mesa-like structure, and, you know, sets up the kind of bleakness and the hopelessness of this scenario. And it's cool because you know what's got to happen because you've seen the trailers. You know which characters have to link up and everything like that. And Charlize Theron's character is apparently up to something else and has an ulterior motive and goes off course, leading a whole group of people led by Immortan Joe himself to head on after her and see what's going on. And Nicholas Holt's character is one such young up-and-coming buck that really wants to, you know, showcase his glory. And there's, again, a lot of interesting kind of like religious gobbledygook that's heaped upon these characters from their bogus, you know, leader. In this case, there's you know, talk about Valhalla and dying and being resurrected, and there's these cool like you know, kind of gimmicks for the characters, like, you know, when they're about to go on a suicide mission, they'll spray their mouths with chrome paint. And I love that there's an altar with actually like all the vehicles are operated by placing the wheel into a socket, and all the wheels are actually like arranged in this altar, and everybody goes and grabs their wheel and runs off and gets in adventures. And that's just like the first 10-15 minutes right there, and you're already like overwhelmed with images. And it quickly ramps up into an insane battle on the road, and kind of lets up a couple times. It does. It's kind of like Terminator 2 in that regards. It is essentially a long chase sequence, but there are a few moments where you have some breath. You can kind of flesh out some characters and have some moments. And it's funny, I was talking with a few of my peers that were, some of them were immediately poo-pooing the film before seeing it. And I was like, yeah, this is going to be a piece of crap. You know, just because it's an action movie. It's a dumb action movie. You know, who cares? We're going to go see it because it's free or whatever. And then some of those guys who turned around at the end of the screening were like, wow, you know, it's a freak show, but there's something to it. And there really is something to it. And I was talking about how there was, about how the characters were just fleshed out enough, because this type of movie, if they were going to go for it and just go for edge and action throughout, it's like a horror movie that takes too much time to express what is behind all the horror. No, you have to know to deliver the horror and keep it abstract enough. And in this case, we have to like the characters well enough and know what their motivations are, but we don't need to know their entire history. I mean, we do learn quite a bit about Imperator Furiosa and Max. Of course, we know enough that he's haunted by the people that he couldn't save before. And that's good enough. That's enough to make it. And it's true. Like, you can go on a trip or a cruise or something, or go to a party and something, and within a couple hours end up liking somebody and not necessarily knowing, you know, everything about their past, but just getting a vibe for them. And that's what this film has to do. It has to get across that you feel a little bit for these characters, and you have some empathy and can kind of understand where they're coming from, and then that's all you need to kind of set the stage. And man, visually this thing is a powerhouse. And George Miller is, should be rightfully lauded for trying to avoid CGI as much as possible. But some of the stuff is so outlandish. It looks, almost, fake or green screen. And I know there was probably some composite shots because there was some stuff that looked kind of green screen. But I was reading another article where he actually screened some footage for other cinematographers, and they were fooled into thinking some of the crashes were legitimately like CGI recreations. But no, it was just cars blowing up in the desert. But it was like that case where I know when they were making Twister, they had a hard time making a CGI tornado because the real tornadoes like looked so much weirder than like this. So they had to kind of make it look fake on purpose, because if you saw like what a real tornado looked like, you'd just be like, whoa, that's got to be fake. And so they were running into that kind of scenario, I guess, with this, where some of the shots were just so insane and so, visually explosive that people thought it's got to be CGI. So I'd love to see some special features on maybe a Blu-ray release at some point to see like, what was practical effects and what wasn't. And but it was just a blast, especially, seeing so many knockoffs and even loving homages like Doomsday a couple of years ago. Well, probably closer to 10 years now. It was great to get back in the Mad Max universe. But, I mean, this film just doesn't really give up its vigor. And I think, kind of structurally and in the terms of pacing, it's definitely the strongest out of the bunch. And, if you liked the finale of The Road Warrior, you're going to love this thing because it's just spread out. And it's larger than life. Yes, there is a guitar player that accompanies the Junkie XL soundtrack, which is fantastic. No offense to Brian May. But, I was never really a giant fan of Brian May's Mad Max kind of score work. I don't know. There was just something about it that seemed kind of like cheesy, I guess, sometimes, or like almost sounded like stock score work or something. So I know I'm gonna probably burn in hell for debasing the great Brian May, but I love the soundtrack here, and the film is just structured great because it's got to kind of get all these characters together, because Mad Max is originally, in this chase scene is strapped to the front of Nux's vehicle, with again, Bane getting stuck in another mask situation with a steel face mask, because he's still the entire time tied in with an IV to Nux, who's, kind of sucking his blood through this tube throughout this whole scene. And things, of course, get crazy from there, and they all cross paths with Furiosa, and Furiosa has some women with her, and they've been kind of keeping the relationships between this and Immortan Joe, kind of under wraps. I won't spoil it, so you can go check it out for yourself. But, Max has to decide whether or not he's going to stand up for something again, and, and listen to the voices that always try to torment him, because of all the other failures from helping people in times past. So yeah, you're interested in this character because he's not likely to go out of his way to help people, and even if they're young, beautiful women, which was a great idea that they had these kind of like pristine looking creatures in the midst of all this nastiness, and even when Charlize Theron rubs like motor oil on her head as a war paint, and I love that kind of hokey vehicle symbology, the chrome on the teeth, the war paint with oil, the altar of wheels and stuff like that. I just never get enough of that kind of stuff. It's like a shtick, but it's so cool. And so she's rough and tumble, and obviously concocted as a female equivalent to Max, and even somebody I think in Australia was just saying people should boycott the film because of its feminist overtones, and I don't know, it was just more of a humanist tale. I mean, there's obviously very strong women in the film, but it's more of a humanist. One person can't subjugate someone else and own them and bend them to their needs. Despite the fact that the world is possibly filled with people that are dying of radiation sickness, and it's completely gone to hell. There's also like people that are from other civilizations that get in, so it's really, really interesting how they mix in these characters as people that drive these vehicles that look like hedgehogs, and they're almost kind of like Reavers from like the Firefly series, and they're just like sharp and pointy objects sticking out of every aspect of the car. There's, you know, motorcycles involved. It just keeps inventing new and interesting things, new terrain. There's a great scene inside a sandstorm that also has, you know, storms and lightning inside of it. There's like this blue drenched landscape where there's like a soggy portion of the desert. It's a waterlogged, and the trucks, you know, keep getting stuck in it. And I always love when they have those blue drenched scenes. They would have these great like brightly, like naturally lit counterpoints, either like from like a candle or something, kind of like a yellowish glow, and it has a just great, fantastic look to it. There was almost in the print I saw, well, probably digital, there was a weird motion artifact, almost like when you ever get somebody who did a really horrible job making a like a digital rip of a Blu-ray or something like that, and if you watch it on your TV, it's got that like motion judder. I was seeing some of that in some of the motion scenes. I didn't get to see it in IMAX or 3D, unfortunately, so I'm gonna have to go back again. So I don't know if that was just the presentation of the cinema I was at, or if it's something inherent in the filmmaking, or I'm gonna have to, you know, check into that. But still, it didn't detract from the overall visceral experience. And yeah, I just loved how it kind of created a couple plot twists that were just nice and organic, and then came to a great conclusion on what to do and how to overcome it. And it was just so nicely put together. You know, you figure something that took so long to make, it would be either overthought, like a, you know, Chinese Democracy Guns N' Roses album, where they just keep rewriting and writing, and it's like, or Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, where it's just, you know, too many revisions, and it just never, you know, got that vibe, that classic vibe again. And that's what this thing does. It's very modern. I mean, it's great. It's visually splendid and amazing, but it does have that feel. Like when I think back on it, I think back on it as much the same way I do as the Road Warrior. It's got that feel like it could have come from, you know, the early 80s at heart. And I really love that about it. And I love that it's weird. I love that George Miller is able to maintain his weirdness and strangeness and in all his character names and their behavior. And I love that he has a lot of Australian actors in this film, and it's not just all about the Hollywood stars. So I was looking forward to this, you know, the most out of the summer batch of films. And I gotta say, as much as I loved Avengers Age of Ultron, and I had a good time with it, this is really the one to beat for me. I don't anticipate anything else coming out in the next few months that's going to connect with me on the same kind of level as this. So I heartily recommend going to check out Mad Max Fury Road. It's just so original. That's what I love about it. There's so many films that are action films. You know, Fury 7 came out recently, and nothing against that either, but there's films of this ilk, either things that have come off in the wake of the Mad Max series, or just other, you know, action adventure films that all have a kind of similar core or seed. And this is going to stand, you know, head and shoulders above those films just for the sheer originality of it. You know, you've got George Miller doing his own thing, you know, producing the film and just going at it with his own kind of vision and style. And as much as people, you know, diss the auteur theory, you know, sometimes it applies in a fashion. You know, Terry Gilliam films have a Terry Gilliam-esque feel, and George Miller it strangely does things like Babe and Happy Feet and Witches of Eastwick, but when he's doing Mad Max, it's got that Mad Max vibe. And this is just firing on all thrusters. Sorry to use the cliche, but just stunningly original and inventive in a way that we rarely see in the cinemas nowadays. So I can't believe it took 30 years for him to make it, but I'm glad they did, and it totally made up for any personal kind of disappointments I had from Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome, which I need to rewatch now anyways. So I think it's time to do maybe a trilogy marathon, though now it's a quadrilogy. I hope to get this on Blu-ray sometime soon, but in the meantime, I'm going to go check it out at least one more time in the cinemas. And hopefully you guys do too, and hopefully you appreciate it as much as I did. My mom hated it, so, you know, bear that in mind. That'll be the caveat. So hopefully you guys have a good time, and hope you're having a good early summer. Summer starts in May now, according to Hollywood. So things are, I'd say they're looking up. I don't know if they're going to move up any higher than this one. So this is probably going to be like one of the highlights of the summer for me. But really digging it. So cheers. Thanks for watching. We'll talk to you soon.